Good morning. Welcome into the Dave Elliott Show here on a Monday morning. It's 8:08 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time in Naples, Florida. It's 8:08 p.m. Monday night in Perth, Australia, where Bob Weiner joins us this morning. Bob, of course, is a Democratic strategist, senior Democratic strategist. You've been consulting the Hillary Clinton campaign a little bit on and off, too, as well, Bob, right?
All true, Dave. And, you know, I can't take a few days break in Australia. And, gee whiz, New Zealand Talk Radio called me this morning, but there's no way I'm going to not talk to you because at least that keeps me in touch with home while I'm watching CNN and looking at the clips and getting all of the Democratic leadership talking points. So I think I'm kind of up in this thing, given that Abedin, whose emails they're actually going after now through Anthony Weiner, her slimy husband that she's divorcing, is a friend of mine and someone that we've gone to Australia. Speaking of Australia, we've gone together here during the 2000 Olympics.
Yeah. Now, by the way, you're down there for a Masters running event, right?
That's true, the World Masters Track Championships, and I'm helping the U.S. direct the press. It's a way to give back to the sport that I love, so I've volunteered and got myself elected to that. That's right.
Absolutely. So now tell me, first of all, the polls don't seem to be moving much in relation to this from what I've been able to see, but what is your take on what Director Comey did, and do you think it violates the Hatch Act, as Harry Reid and a few others have suggested?
Dave, I wouldn't put it past the polls to be moving, and I hope we're not in a Brexit situation. But the latest poll of polls that I looked at right before I did the show tonight to make sure I got them, they're 1, 2, 3, and 4 at 5 points. So your poll of polls is bringing you to 2 points. That's vulnerable, and it's stabilized at that, and I think it might stretch back out as people realize that Hillary is being victimized by a Republican appointee who actually interfered with the election and was counseled by the senior Justice Department officials that he's supposed to actually work for not to interfere with the election. So this is a real problem. And when Senator Harry Reid, the Senate Democratic leader who could be the leader of the Senate if the Senate is taken back by the Democrats, and he may well, he could be the subject of investigation for violations of the Hatch Act and be subject to legal jeopardy of his own. I love it when you can prosecute the prosecutor.
Well, you know, a lot of people have said that if she wins, she would have to put up with him for another 7 years or so. He was appointed to a 10-year term by President Obama in 2013, I believe it is, and she'd have to deal with him unless, I guess, she could fire him if she wanted to.
Well, she can't really fire him, but you can prosecute him. And do you really think that Chuck Schumer, as leader of the Senate, is not going to prosecute the guy who 10 days before the election throws out innuendo and vague and may or may not be things and does the same kind of fishing expedition that Ken Starr did on Bill Clinton? And when you victimize the Clintons, you do it at your own peril. Don't forget that Clinton left office partly because of his victimization, also because of 23 million jobs, peace, and balancing the budget for 3 straight years, but partly because of the Starr victimization as the most popular president in history with 70%. So you victimize Hillary here, and she's fighting back. She's demanding full facts. She's demanding the reasons. And the double standard that Reid talked about in his letter, where he won't give you the facts on the Russians who did the hacking in the first place that's releasing all this information, that 19 intelligence agencies, 19, Dave, in fact, the entire intelligence community says the Russians did the hacking. And Comey's going after this stuff using that kind of information and won't talk about it, but only wants to issue a search warrant and go after slimy Anthony Weiner's house because poor Uma was married to him.
Well,
Come on.
Let me ask you, what do you think that the Clinton campaign ought to be doing right now to deal with this? Are they handling it the proper way?
I think Hillary demanding that Comey out with full information is the right way to go because he has no information. Now the truth comes out. It wasn't put in the letter, but it's Anthony Weiner's emails, not Hillary Clinton's emails, but Anthony Weiner's. You know, it comes out that it's very likely duplicative emails that he's already got. But he makes it look like in this fishing expedition that he's coming after something new about Hillary.
Yeah.
And it stops her, Dave. It stops her from being able to talk about education, paying for kids' college educations. It stops her from talking about a consistent foreign policy, not one where Mexicans are rapists and McCain's not a war hero and a guy who is grabbing women's you-know-what and brags about it, and Putin's is a strong leader and wages are too high. It stops her from being able to talk about all that. And now she's got to talk about, as Bernie said, the damn emails.
Well, it seems that she did do that on Saturday night and seems to be back on message now. Is that the right approach to take?
Yes. Demanding that Comey come out and then diverting to talk about what people actually care about, which isn't some bureaucratic thing. You know, she did not risk national security, Dave. Her email server. Colin Powell emailed that he recommended the same thing. That email came out. Powell was reluctant to admit it, but then the email came out saying he recommended it to her, and he did the same thing. And so did Condi Rice do the same thing. They had private emails. Why? Because Hillary Clinton and the other secretaries didn't want people like Louis Gohmert, the stupidest congressman, going through their emails. And I don't blame her for not wanting that. That's what Carville said.
Well, also,
Carville said the reason she did it was she didn't want Louis Gohmert combing through her emails. And you know who was hacked? You and I have talked about this. It wasn't the Clintons. It was the White House. It was Target. It was the Office of Personnel Management and 3 million employees. But Bill Clinton's emails were successful. Only when they got to other people and other servers did they get hacked. So Hillary did not intend to violate national security. That's why the FBI didn't prosecute her in the first case. There's no legal jeopardy there.
There was no intent, yeah. But it's also important to point out that in the case of Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice, the State Department didn't really have secure servers available at that time. And basically, Powell said he was using his BlackBerry because it was the best method he had available to him at the time. In reality, that was the case. Since then, of course, we've got the secure servers and we have all the rest of that. So, and by the way, to your by the way to your point,
servers, the State Department was hacked. The State Department was hacked at the highest levels, and their information was hacked. Bill Clinton's server was not. And this Republican Party that claims to be the party of the private sector, so Hillary went private with a server that she thought was more secure. She was right.
Well, it turns out she was, but you never know,
right.
and you never know until after the fact. And I'm sure if the Russians have their way, they'll try to go in and hack it now and say they hacked it.
I'm sure they did try, and they didn't get it. Yeah. But she made a point, and Bill Clinton, smart guy that he is, knows how to put up firewalls and knows how to make sure that kind of stuff doesn't happen.
Yeah.
You know, I really think it's tragic that she's being blamed for better security than all agencies of the federal government that have been hacked by the Russians.
So assuming that the polling up until this point was not going to narrow, and that she seemed to have an electoral college advantage prior to this announcement on Friday, do you think this revelation could cost her the election?
I don't think this is the country where we're going to have a Brexit vote or a Colombia vote like the FARC that was able to engineer a peace deal, except that the people of Colombia were too smart and rebelled against the government and Obama's, by the way. And, you know, I'll hit where it takes because I wrote an op-ed on that, as you know. I don't think it's going to be that kind of an election where it reverses to that degree because people do remember Trump wanting to give away the nuclear codes, and that's something that's very scary, that he wants to give away nuclear weapons, not the codes, to countries like Korea and Japan. That just makes me feel safe, and to let the Russians go into Syria, that makes you feel safe.
Yeah.
And a guy who tweets his foreign policy on the spur of his rear end when he's up at night, that's not the kind of president that people want, and I don't think people are going to vote that way. I honestly think that it's going to widen a little as people consider this and realize that Hillary's being victimized by a Republican plot, as you were. This right-wing conspiracy is still there against her. And on the emails, Trump's the one who said that the FBI, don't forget, should go after Anthony Weiner's emails. So what is Comey, the Republican appointee, doing Trump's bidding? I think there's a little bit of that going on.
But
I think Comey has destroyed the very reputation he was so wanting to save by looking like he's objective and going. But you don't be objective 10 days before an election and slam one of the two candidates.
Well, but you have to admit
exactly what the Hatch Act says you shall not do.
But you have to admit there's a little bit of hypocrisy out there from the same people that were praising Comey for his decision in July not to prosecute, and now all of a sudden he's the most evil man on the face of the earth. You have to admit there is a little problem there with trying to criticize him.
No, he was right not to prosecute. I gave you the reasons. Her server was secure. There was no intention to violate national security. In fact, quite the reverse, better than the federal government. She protected it. So that was the right decision. It's not hypocritical to say now he's playing politics to push it out the other way because Trump and his people have been embarrassing him about it. That's the wrong decision to intervene that way.
All right. Well, Bob, we'll leave it right there. You're in Perth, Australia, to do something very pleasant and have a good time. And we look forward to chatting with you when you get back.